All right, dudes. As offered at the outset of episode 77 of the Spicer Speaking podcast, a palpable party of three this week. Enjoyed that chat with Michelle Delancey, tournament director of the Gallery Classic. Talking more Gallery Classic with my next guest. He's a familiar face or voice if you're not watching the YouTube version of this endeavor. Been the golf writer at the Desert Sun newspaper since 1986, Reading to cover the inaugural Gallery Classic. Welcome back, our pal Larry Bohannan, to the show. Hello, Larry.
Hey, Jed, how you doing?
I am well, thank you for asking. My first question to you, kind of a personal one. Typically,
Oh,
at this time of year, we'd be discussing the first major championship of the season. We are now discussing something that, in some ways, is markedly different, and in some ways, we have some similarities. Having covered the former Chevron A&A Dyna since 1986, if not earlier, you maybe even started covering it years preceding that. Do you feel whole? Do you feel an absence? Do you miss it?
yeah, I think so. Even though we have a new PGA Tour Champions event in town, and I think we're all looking forward to seeing how that will play out and how the community will respond to that event. It's weird after really for the Desert 51 years of that tournament at Mission Hills Country Club to think that that tournament will be played not 2 weeks from now, but instead at the end of April and in Houston, and with none of the trappings of the tournament here. It's a very strange thing, and I think it'll feel more hollow the actual week that we're supposed to be covering it. And then when we watch on Golf Channel and NBC, because they'll be on NBC, what the tournament looks like this year. I think that's really going to be the moment when we realize it's not our tournament anymore. It's
Yeah.
gone, and they can try and keep some of the legacies going, but it's going to be very hard in a different state on a different course with different players.
I mean, given your annual routine in preparing for what was, we've talked a lot about the departure of the event, the bitter and the better. I mean, I'll be honest, man, I kind of have stopped. I don't want to say stopped following the LPGA because I'm still a fan and a proponent and interested in the players and the product. But
Right.
in some sense, I have not followed it as closely as I would in Reading to prepare to cover and enjoy the Chevron A&A Dyna. Have you stepped away personally from
You
following
know,
the
I
LPGA?
I think that's fair. I was watching the tournament this weekend on Golf Channel, the HSBC. It's an interesting duel between Jin Young Ko and Nelly Korda. Danielle Kang had a pretty good run in that tournament as well. But it's different knowing that they're not going to be coming here. They're not building up to the Desert and the first major. And I think that will be true probably of a lot of golf fans in the Desert who may have only been interested in the LPGA because of that tournament being here for so long and the legacy of Dinah Shore in some instances, although, gosh, it's been 29 years since Dinah died. So I think they probably have lost some fans in the Coachella Valley, the casual fan. It will be interesting to see if they can ever get another LPGA event here, a regular event, not a major, obviously. How the community would respond to that, depending on the time of year and the like. It'd be tough to bring it into the first quarter of the year now because we're so busy. In fact, that's one of the reasons that the Champions Tour has come in to the Desert. They felt like they could only come here in the first quarter, but they couldn't come here in the first quarter if there was a PGA Tour event, the American Express, and 2 weeks of major tennis and an LPGA major. With the LPGA major gone, they felt like there was room for them.
Talked about loss. Let's talk about what we have gained. I know that I am at least wholeheartedly of the opinion that the Champions Tour at this time is just a better fit for where we live. I don't want to put words in your mouth, so I'll be the one to be critical, I guess, of the fact that I didn't cover the event nearly as long as you have, but in my dozen years covering the LPGA, I just saw the galleries basically dwindle, and Thursday and Friday of the event just be tumbleweeds, where if you were not following Lexi Thompson or Michelle Wie, basically every gallery, save for Sunday, was like a dozen people. It was just not befitting a major vibe. Given our demographic, given a lot of the golf history in the desert, so much of which you've covered via article and book form, just seems like this is a better fit for where we are now for the Champions Tour.
In over the last 20 years or so, I've had people ask me two questions over and over and over again. One is, whatever happened to Anthony Kim? The other is, why don't we have a senior event? The thinking being that the demographic here, particularly in the winter and the spring, early spring, is perfect for the seniors. That we've all seen these guys play, even if they didn't play in the old Bob Hope, which many of them have.
Yeah.
We saw them win major championships. We saw them win big tournaments. The Ernie Els and the Vijay Singhs and the Colin Montgomerys of the world, who weren't necessarily winning in the desert, but also the Fred Couples and the John Cooks and the Joe Durants and guys like that who did win in the desert. And I think part of the argument was always going to be, wouldn't this be great? When Phil stops playing the Bob Hope, he can come play in the senior event here. Because Phil Mickelson did win that the Bob Hope twice in 2002 and 2004, and he would have been the star of the senior tour. But there's still a tremendous amount of recognition with a lot of these players. That wasn't necessarily true with the LPGA. We knew that we were getting the best players in women's golf here every year. They suffered a little bit because they didn't really have an American star. 25 years ago, 20 years ago, Mission Hills Country Club was packed when it was Annika Sorenstam and Kari Webb and the onset of Lorena Ochoa.
Oh.
And there was a lot of star power on that tour. There's not as much star power, it doesn't seem like now, even though there are great players. Jin Young Ko is a tremendous player. Lydia Ko is a tremendous player. But for some reason, that tournament stopped attracting as many people. And, some of it might have been problems with the people down at Augusta National and some of the things they were doing during tournament week here, whether it was the Augusta National Women's Amateur or the drive, chip, and putt. Some of it may have been that there were fewer American winners of this tournament. I don't know exactly. It kind of confused me. But I think that is one of the storylines going in this week is what kind of crowds will they get, and how will the community kind of react to the event? Not only being played here, but being played on the same golf course that the LPGA played for 51 years.
Well, let's transition to the golf course and the players and playing field and some of your expectation and anticipation. As I told Michelle Delancey, the math that I've done, and I'm not very good at math, admittedly, the men will be playing about 5% more golf course roughly than what we saw the LPGA play. Conversely, the Champions Tour fellas hit it about 10% farther on average than what we see with the LPGA. So I don't know how those numbers are going to mix by way of, we're going to see a lot of different landing areas than what we've become accustomed to with the Chevron A&A Dyna, or if it's going to be somewhat similar. I don't know. How do you view that?
I think the interesting numbers will be 4 versus 1.5, meaning that the rough for the LPGA was 4 inches high,
right?
Because it was a major championship, and if you hit it into the rough, sometimes it would only get up to 3 inches. But if you hit it into that rye rough, juicy rye rough, it was very difficult to get out of there. You will not see that kind of rough for the Champions Tour, mostly because it's not a major. They don't have to have it that way. If they go play their U.S. Open or their Senior PGA Championship, yeah, they're going to run into tougher conditions. They won't get into that here. I think some of the fairways will be a little bit wider. We were told that the greens are still going to be running somewhere around 12, which should be fun because if you get above the hole on some of those greens and they're running that fast, it's almost impossible to stop the ball and not have a 6 or 7 footer coming back. The golf course is going to play to a little more than 7,000 yards, it appears. But again, these guys do hit the ball a little bit farther. On average, there are certainly some LPGA players hitting it out there 300, but so I think you're going to see some awfully good scoring. But again, it's a 3-day tournament, not a 4-day tournament. So, will you see somebody get to 19 or 20 under par for 3 days? That's pretty good golf, no matter what the tees, no matter what the rough. So I'll be interested to see how and a lot of these guys, they may know the desert, but they may not know that golf course. Some guys on that tour know that golf course really well. That would be Fred Couples. That would be John Cook. John Cook basically grew up at Mission Hills Country Club under the tutelage of Ken Venturi when Ken Venturi was the head pro there. So how much of an advantage will that be as opposed to how much has that golf course changed since they played it last?
Friends, you're tuning into episode 77, the Spicer Speaking podcast, talking Gallery Classic with Larry Bohannan, golf writer for the Desert Sun newspaper since 1986. Follow his coverage all year long, all tournament long, online at desertsun.com, or heck, just go buy a newspaper or get a subscription to the Desert Sun. Let's stick with some of those numbers. I mean, going through 2022 on PGA Tour champions, again, no math wizard over here, man, but average tournament winning score was about 16 or 17 under. As you said, they play 54 holes, not 72. So we're talking 5-6 under a day. That means on par 72, we're looking at 66 or 67 being pretty good. Do you sense that there are lower numbers available for PGA Tour champions on the Dinah Shore tournament course? Is there a 64 out there?
Oh, I think there probably is. I think every time you watch the Senior Tour, there's one day when somebody goes 8 under par, just like kind of on the regular tour, where somebody will get a hot round going and can get it going that way. Earlier this year in Hawaii, Steve Stricker shot a 60 and had every chance to shoot a 59. This last tournament, the Galleri Classic in Arizona, Steve Stricker shot 7 under the last day. Not Steve Stricker, David Toms.
David Toms, winner, yeah.
Shot 7 under the last day and came back and won it with 17 under par. So it all kind of averages out. I think you're going to look at the best players playing the best golf, and there'll be some guys out on that tour who you don't necessarily know who can still play some pretty good golf. But yeah, I would expect maybe somebody someplace to lead the first day with about a 64 or so, and then maybe drift back. You do 64 3 straight days, congratulations. You went on that tour handily.
Yeah. I don't know if I see, I mean, you referenced some of the low scores. And again, there are some tournaments, 3 or 4 of them, where they're chasing 22 under as a winning score. I guess I don't see that. I mean, we don't know necessarily what's going to happen, but I don't see dudes chasing the 60 or 61 on this golf course.
Well, you got to remember the kind of golf course that it is. The par 5s are very gettable on the Dinah Shore tournament course. The 2nd hole, the 9th hole, the 11th hole, you can score on those holes. They should be making, or at least putting, for birdies. The difficulty is on the par 3s. The par 3s on that golf course are quite demanding. And how will they handle some of the shorter par 4s? the back-to-back par fours at 6 and 7, for instance. Back-to-back par fours at 12 and 13 are 13's kind of a tough hole.
Yeah.
And then you get to 15, and that's a par birdie hole. 16 is a difficult hole because you've got to drive the ball very well and long down the left-hand side to avoid a tree that just sits in the middle. So, if they can play the par fives and let's say 3 under par, well, that means they only need to make a couple of birdies the rest of the day to get to 67. But you also have to avoid the water. You have to avoid some of the problems. There's still, even though they took out 100 eucalyptus trees there a couple of years ago, there's still a lot of trees on that golf course. So there's trouble. I still think that there's 66s and 65s out there and maybe a 64 for a hot round. That doesn't necessarily mean you can do it 3 days in a row.
There's so much, and we've talked about this as well over the years, and what I've grown to really appreciate for the Dynasty Shore tournament course is there is a lot of nuance out there. So, I mean, certainly for a mid handicap or even, like an 8 type player, you can't just blast it out there on a lot of holes on that golf course. You might hit a good drive that's going to end up in a weird place, certainly dependent on pin position, which is to say, there's some nuance, there's some course knowledge to be had. We saw that over the years, and you've seen it much more than I have with seasoned players on the LPGA, not just hitting the ball well, but knowing where to place a lot of those tee shots so they can have birdie chances, the proper angles into greens. I mean, you mentioned a few of these PGA Tour champions guys that have some familiarity with this golf course, but on the 78 player field as a whole, I don't know, throw out an arbitrary number to say if even 30% of them have played this golf course multiple times.
Yeah, at their media day, they had Fred Funk come and talk to the media, and his recollection was that he had played the golf course, but he didn't really recall the golf course very well. I think again, some guys with some desert ties, certainly Fred Couples, John Cook, have played that golf course a lot. Has Ernie Els ever played that golf course? I don't think so.
Galleri Classic, VJ Singh, have these guys been out Mission Hills a lot? I don't
know. And even last year's Player of the Year, Steve Alker, he would have had no reason to come here and play because he was out there trying to make money on the Corn Ferry Tour before he was able to get his PGA Tour Champions card. So a lot of these guys will be taking a look at the golf course for the first time, and between a couple of the little slight dog legs that you got to deal with, and greens that are kind of difficult as well, with a lot of slopes and a lot of speed, you're going to see some surprisingly high scores for some guys, I think.
Given what we've assessed and some of the players we've talked about, some that we did not talk about, certainly reference him with Michelle, Bernhard Langer tops the list, Steve Stricker, whom you mentioned, Jim Furyk, John Daly, Miguel Angel Jimenez, Olazabal, Montgomery, Marco Merrick, Corey Pavin. Anybody that jumping out for you in this field that you see? It's a little different assessing fields, obviously, on PGA Tour champions, smaller fields, no cut. We do see players get hot and kind of stay that way for the season, maybe more so a little bit than the other tours, although this season is open through 4 events with 4 different winners. I don't know. Anybody's skill set that you like a couple weeks out for the Gallery Classic?
If you don't say Bernhard Langer, then you're an idiot because he's won 45 times. That being said, I think the player that I'll look for the first day will be Steve Stricker. He played very well at the end of last year on the PGA Tour Champions. Came out, won the first tournament this year in Hawaii. And just seems to be that guy right now who is able to win any tournament he plays in. Now he hasn't won the last couple. He's not doing that thing where the rookie comes in and wins everything because he's not a rookie. He's been out on that tour for a couple of years, but he would be somebody to watch. Obviously, Langer did win a tournament this year already at the age of 65. one more win, and he has the all record all to himself. He's tied with Hale Irwin now for 45 victories on that tour. And this would be a great place to do it. I think a lot of these guys are going to look at this golf course and know that this was a major championship golf course, and it would be a feather in their cap to say I won on that golf course. And then I think after that it kind of is catch as catch can.
Yeah.
Ernie Els has played very well this year, but has not won. Alex Checa has 3 top 10s this year, has not won. One of those guys at some point is going to put together 3 rounds instead of 2 rounds and win this thing. But and then there's some guys that you look at and you go, they're big names, but have they played decently enough to win? Colin Montgomery is a great driver of the golf ball, but he hasn't really won on the senior tour the way that maybe we would have expected him to. L's kind of another one of those guys. And then you look at the hot player. David Toms played very well. He's got some history here in the desert, winning the Cologuard last week. So yeah. He would be somebody. But if I were going to put money down on something, and I don't know that you should be betting on PGA Tour Champions golf, it would probably be on Steve Stricker.
I think that makes 2 of us, given his play of late and the fact that we talked about the onus on having a really, really good putter. It's going to be tough to top. Steve Stricker is the favorite going into the week. I'll ask you lastly, as I am wont to ask you basically for every tournament that we preview and discuss, come Sunday, March 26th, what's the story that you ultimately want to write?
I'd like to write a story about how big the crowds were, about how the tournament was embraced by a demographic that we expect to embrace this tournament. I think in terms of the winner, if Fred Funk in the media day mentioned that Fred Couples is the rock star of the PGA Tour seniors, even though he's, I think, 64. You'll see big crowds following Fred, and he would be a very, very popular winner, not just here, but any place. He did win on that tour last year. I thought there was a chance that he might walk away from the tour last year after that one last win, but maybe this will be that one last win.
You'd be more compelled to write about the comeback of crowds to Mission Hills Country Club than Bernhard Langer winning an all-time record 46th PGA Tour Champions event?
Well, if he wins this year, he can come back next year if the crowds are really good.
I hear you, man.
I am interested to see just how this tournament is embraced by the Valley. There've been a lot of talk, like I say, through the years about getting this tournament, getting a senior tour event back in the desert. Well, now it's here. So let's see how people go to the event.
Well, if you end up writing that story, writing this story, writing another story, I'll look forward to reading it and following the coverage online. Friends, it's Larry Bohannan, golf writer for the Desert Sun newspaper. You can follow him again all year long, all Gallery Classic long online at desertsun.com, or go out and get yourself a tangible handheld newspaper. Appreciate your time, Larry. Physical newspaper. Put it in your hand. Read it with your Frosted Flakes. I look forward to seeing you out at Mission Hills Country Club for a different event, but same spot that we usually get to convene.
Yes.
Late winter, early spring every year. Appreciate your time, my friend.
No problem. Talk to you soon.